Hi, and welcome to video number 4 in our Above, Down, Inside Out series. And in this video now, we're going to be looking at the number one cause of what actually is going to be leading people to become sick and unwell in the first place. It is a myth. It is a pervasive myth that we are taught since we are little kids. It's that when you're feeling fine, everything is okay. I'm healthy. Nothing can oftentimes be farther from the truth. Feeling fine does not mean that you are actually healthy. So let's consider on this particular little chart that we have right here. We all start at 100% life. Remember, 100% is different based on your genetics, your anatomy, your individual set of circumstances before you're born, slightly after you're born, all of this kind of stuff. It's not appropriate for you to compare yourself to me or vice versa. Avoid the not as good as syndrome, so NAGA, comparing to other people. Always compare you to you. Also, of course, being realistic that where you are today may not have been where you were 10 years ago, and it's probably not going to be exactly where you're going to be 10 years from now. Whatever is 100% possible for you. So we've got 100% life, and then we have 100% death, 0% life. And we have the element of time across the bottom right here. The point that I want to illustrate on this particular little graph here is that we think in terms of how we feel. And we presume, and that's the issue, it's the presumption that based on how we feel is the reflection about what's actually going on the inside. But nevertheless, how many of you watching this video right now either A, know somebody personally, or B, at least has heard an anecdote of somebody who was fit as a fiddle, running marathons, doing all of the right kind of stuff, living life, dropped dead of a heart attack? Or sudden diagnosis of cancer with no warning signs whatsoever. My point is that cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis, even something like a cavity, these are not things that just happen overnight. These are processes that usually take months, years, and usually decades to develop. All the while, a person is, quote unquote, feeling fine. And because they're feeling fine, they never think that they should actually get a blood test, get a checkup, get a check-in, never get any of these systems assessed. They just presume everything's going okay, and that's where they get into trouble. It's because your body, as we've described, is not this weak, fragile little thing. Your body's designed to win. It will find intelligent ways of compensating, of changing your physiology, of finding ways to compensate for the various stresses that you have going on in the course of your life. And it is usually able to adapt to these stresses around 50% loss of function before you actually start to experience any symptoms whatsoever. And that's when the pain, that's when the aches start to creep in, and the joke is, haha, that's because you're just starting to get older. No, there are people who in their 80s and their 90s, yeah, there might still be some mobility issues, but they're still getting out there, they're still moving, they're still living a grand life. There's other people in their 50s and their 60s, bent over, nearly crippled. Chronological age is not the major factor here. Biological age is. And by biological age, we're referring to the age of the length of time and the source of the stress that's going on and that's afflicting your body. So, for example, let's consider, if you would, a 20-year-old who so happened to have a nasty, gnarly physical injury that has been plaguing them, or at least been showing up in their body, that started from when they fell off their bike when they were 5 years old. or even may have happened because they were a forceps delivery and it strained their neck when they were born. We don't think of 20 years old as being old by any stretch of the imagination. But if you consider that in that 20-year-old, their body has never known anything different, and it's been trying to adapt for these stresses, these problems for 15 to 20 years, that's the true nature of the problem. The person's chronological age simply means that there's been more time where these things can actually impact them. What's most important is how long the underlying process has been there. And we repeat, it often takes between a 40 to 60% loss in function before you actually start to feel anything. And even then, that doesn't mean that you've got true blue blown pathology. If you're watching this particular video and you've struggled with a number of different kinds of health issues yourself, you've probably been to a number of different healthcare specialists, and they've looked at your blood tests and they've looked at your scans and they've said, quote, everything looks like it's normal. Nothing's going on here. And you're beside yourself because your experience tells you, no, something is clearly wrong. It's because when you're looking at things from a pathology standpoint, you're looking at it in terms of here to here. This is too much. This is too little. But the healthy range is something like this. Now, this is not pointing a finger by any stretch of the imagination. This is a matter, simply put, of perspective. That a lot of times, when people are looking for true blue pathology, they're looking for the stuff that's on this side or they're looking for it here. But what we have is we oftentimes have these gray zones, one side to the other, where you may not have true blue pathology, but you're certainly not healthy either. And from the traditional medical standpoint, typically, treatment is reserved only when you have a formal diagnosis, when the pathology has reached a certain point to where treatment is usually warranted. And here's the kicker. That is going to be somewhere in the vicinity around a 70% loss of function. As a couple of very basic examples, osteoporosis. You can't see it on an X-ray scan until you have a 70% loss of your bone density, which also usually means a significant loss of muscle mass, which is actually one of the major contributing factors. Heart disease. You can have a cardiac artery that is blocked by 90%. It's narrow 90% of the way before a person actually starts having any chest symptoms whatsoever. Cancer cells can get to the point of having full-blown level 4 pathology before you actually notice any changes in the adjacent body function. So point being, that is when we're getting to the point of pathology. And if you had known that this is what's going on, of course you would have done something earlier. But what you didn't know, because you were running your body based on a belief that if I feel fine, I must be healthy, as a consequence of that, it ended up getting you into trouble. This is one of the reasons why I have previously talked about always wanting to make sure that you are doing the right things based on procedure, not necessarily on outcome. Can a person who's taking good care of their nutrition, good care of their exercise, all of that, can they still get cardiovascular disease and cancer? The unfortunate reality is yes. It's about probabilities. And you want to be proactive about these things. Remember, we talked about in a previous video, if a person has known cardiovascular disease, they're more proactive with their health. They do check their body function. They get regular tests. They take care of their nutrition. They do exercise. Why? Because they don't want their genetic potential to express itself. As a consequence, they don't get it. Why? Because they were doing something about it. But in the same breath, we don't want to wait until we've actually developed a pathology to actually do something about it. And I use this as a bit of a silly example, but I think it'll get my point across. Remember what we just talked about with the gray zone? Well, imagine, if you would, that the definition of obesity is if you are 20 pounds overweight. Well, using the same logic that we would have just applied right here, not waiting until you have full-blown pathology before you do anything about it. If you're only 15 pounds overweight, quote, only 15 pounds overweight, what it means is you're not fat enough to exercise. That doesn't make much sense, does it? It's like, no, something may not be to the point of pathology, but it's not normal. It's not healthy. So this is where you will get many a very divergent opinions about what is an appropriate course of treatment at any given period of time. Oftentimes, the medical model is designed for people when they have crossed the 70% threshold and they need treatment for certain symptoms. Otherwise, it could be very dangerous for them. But in the same breath, any treatment for the symptoms needs to be done at the same time as working to reverse the underlying condition that actually brought a person to that point. So as an example, and again, this is not diagnosing, this is not giving medical advice, but if your blood pressure has gotten so dangerously high that unless you're taking a tablet, you could be at risk of a stroke. Yes, take whatever medication you need, but do what you need to do then to change your lifestyle and your circumstances so that your blood pressure will start to normalize so that you can come off of that tablet if you possibly can. The best medical doctors are the ones who know and are going to reserve medication for only the circumstances that is necessary, as little a dose and as little as possible. And in conjunction with that, all of the best healthcare practitioners are also going to know and recognize that there is a time where something like that is going to be necessary. The question is where along this continuum are you? And the problem, as we've just said, is that the majority of people are waiting till they are either here or here before they actually do anything about it. If we realized, okay, we need to start acting before we feel there's a problem, that's where we have the opportunity to be well, live well, and stay well. So this again is going to show you the way that most people live their lives. And you may well have done this. I am guilty of this one just as well. Again, we can't change the past. It's what do you do with this information forward going? Number one, for yourself. But if you are a spouse, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, a coworker, anybody else like this, you don't have to get on the health kick train and start going nuts and start to become a preacher to everybody else. But by being cognizant of what's going on, there are ways that you can, assist people without becoming preachy. So what we do, we start life at 100%. And then what we have is the accumulation of physical, chemical, and mental stress that adds up. Yes, it can come all at once in a single incident, or, as is the case for most people, it just slowly starts creeping up on us as we let little things slide, or we're maybe not as diligent here or doing the things that we used to do here. And that's where we ultimately are going to reach the pain and the symptom line right there. And that's going to be the moment then that we decide, okay, geez, something's not right here. What do I do about this? The problem is that not everybody takes action at that point. Why? It's because that myth. One of the first myths is that, oh, this is happening because I'm getting older. As a common example, people say, yeah, my shoulder on my side here, my left side, it's hurting more because it's getting older. All right, well, what? Is your left shoulder older than your right shoulder? Or I'm having pain, on the left side of my back through here, it's because I'm getting older. Okay, is your left hip older than your right hip? Well, the answer is no. Or you have arthritis in your neck at the level of the C5 and the C6. Okay. Are those two bones older than all of the others? The answer is no, they aren't. Those areas have been under stress for a longer period of time. Your body is strong. It's designed to win. But all things can only take so much stress for so long before eventually it starts to give. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make, it's the defeatist attitude. There's nothing that I can do about it. This is my lot in life. This happens. Too bad, so sad. And what happens? They make either the slow or the rapid descent. They don't realize that the source of their own healing comes from within, above, down, inside, out. As above, so below. As within, so without. They don't realize that, though, which is the whole point of these particular videos right here, so that you at least know that. That when things are going awry in our life, yes, we do always have to contend with time, gravity, and stress. Those three universal forces always win. All of us do have, with our physical bodies, an expiration date. The question is what is the quality of our life look like for as long as possible and at the highest level as possible while we are here on planet Earth? Our body continues to fight for us, continues to heal until our last breath. As long as there is a breath of life in you, there is hope. So do not fall prey to a victim or defeatist mentality. Now, even when people do take right action, unfortunately, many of people, they fall into this category right here. And this one here is going to be the pain cycle or the pain loop. So what they do is they believe, even after they've gotten appropriate care, they've had a certain crisis that's prompted them to take action. I need to do something different. Otherwise, this is going to keep going down. So they're not a victim and they're not defeatist. Awesome. But they still believe the myth that when I feel fine, then I'm okay and everything is healthy. So what they do is they start to make a Herculean effort through whatever form of care, treatment, diet, exercise regime they are doing. They are working hard to change the negative momentum. And you see it, their tests start to change and their quality of life starts to improve. And they get to this point that you see over here where they're feeling pretty good again. But then when they're feeling good, they stop doing the things that got them there. It's like, oh, I'll maybe cheat on this a little bit, or I won't do quite as much as this. I see this all the time. If I'm prescribing an exercise for a person to do, I tell people straight up, you do this until I personally or somebody with equal qualification tells you to stop. The idea being similar if you were a dentist. Okay, is your dentist going to say, yeah, you can stop brushing your teeth now? No. They're going to say, keep doing it. Or, okay, yeah, you've done excellent in terms of your diet and nutrition. You can stop doing all that. You can go back to eating donuts, coffee, pastries, and all that sort of stuff all the time. No. But this is the point. When people are feeling fine, they start letting drift kick in. And they stop being as proactive with all the things that got them there. And what it means is that they're going to plateau, but unfortunately, they're going to cycle right back down to where they started. And then they're going to have a similar kind of crisis. I need to do something about this. And they'll take the action. And then drift kicks in again. And then they have to do it again. This is why we call it the pain cycle. Because they have to go through a whole bunch of cycles of pain before they actually realize, you know what? This is maybe not the smartest way that I can be managing my health and well-being. Yes, it does take more work, more conscious and deliberate effort in order to stay and to continue to ascend, to be able to keep doing the right kinds of things even when you are feeling well. But in the same breath, what it also means is that when you generate more of that positive momentum, it takes a lot less effort to maintain it once you get there. So for example, a jet plane taking off takes a huge amount of effort and energy to get up off the ground. But once it gets to posting speed, yeah, it still does need, continuous work. Otherwise, it's going down real quick. But it doesn't take as much to maintain altitude than it takes getting it up in the first place. So point being, if you're an individual where you find yourself in the pain cycle or the pain loop, take it as a moment to pause and reflect. Hang on a minute. Yes, I'm going to all of this effort, but in the long run, I'm actually going to spend a lot less money, a lot less time, and a lot less effort if I deliberately keep doing all of the right things to keep me going. Do you remember all the way back in video number 1, we talked about procedural goals? We didn't talk about objective goals. We talked about taking the small right actions and rewarding yourself based on the action, not necessarily the outcome. Are you doing your exercises? Are you taking care of your nutrition? Are you doing these small right kinds of habits, these right kinds of things that are going to keep the probability of your health as high and as close to 100% as possible? Or are you letting them drift back down? This is why I wanted to give you that success strategy right from the start. It's because this is exactly where it fits in. By identifying those little procedures, those little things that you can be doing now to maintain that positive momentum. It'll help you, number one, avoid the death spiral going down in the first place, but it's also going to help keep you out of the pain loop, which is going to keep you in that upward momentum position for as long as possible, getting you as close to 100% as is possible for you. So that only is going to come, as we said, if you are learning and having rewards and things that are bigger, having a vision that is bigger than your current challenges, your current circumstances. These are going to be, for example, the people where no matter what kind of stress they have going on in their life or their life circumstances, they still go to the gym. They still go have their regular checkup with whoever their healthcare provider is. They still have their regular body maintenance. They still eat well no matter what the circumstance is. It's redefining and reestablishing those habits, those continual right actions, because they know that they're going to start drifting down unless they are being proactive in that regard. And here is often going to be then a very, very common expression that is used in the healthcare and in the medical care arena. And it's that you need to listen to what your body is telling you. Well, what does that actually mean? Because as we've just said, pain and symptoms and other problems, they don't show up until you've already lost 50% loss of function. And so my point is here is that there are much more subtle ways that your body does actually communicate with you. And we're going to be looking at those in the very next video. But right now, as we're just closing out this idea, understanding that feeling fine does not mean that you are healthy, that it is not an excuse to wait until you start to experience problems, to start being proactive, that you can prevent than having to take Herculean efforts to try to cure. It has to do with understanding, first and foremost, what is the cause of disease? What causes the person to go from 100% life down toward zero? We've talked about that in the previous videos. We've also talked about what is the cause of life. What is it that's going to take a person from 0 and up to 100%? Again, there is not just one thing, and it is not done just like that either. That is a myth. It takes work. It takes effort. It's simple, but not always easy, and it requires continuous daily action, Kaizen. And it requires leading from the mind, the upper part of your mind, rather than the reactive reptilian part of your brain, so that you can be making better conscious decisions. But to know which way you are going, it's useful to know what are the signs and symptoms to look for. How do you be proactive before there is pain? Or even when you are experiencing pain or problems because you're all the way down at the 70% line. Guess what? There's nothing that anybody's going to do that's going to snap the fingers and make it all go away. That's not the way that your body's going to work. As a general rule of thumb, and again, this is a principle, and this is different in every single individual, but it takes 1 month for your body to heal for every 1 year that the underlying problem was there. Remember, we talked about the biological age of the problem. So in our 20-year-old, we're talking about a problem that has been there for 15 to 20 years. 1 month for every year the problem has been there, even if the 20-year-old only started to experience some aches and pains a week ago. That would not be the true underlying nature of their condition. It also presumes no complications. In other words, there would be only one thing going on. But the reality is, for many, many people, their life circumstances, those sources of stress, the physical, chemical, and the emotional, these continue to feed into the system. And as long as that's the case, it works to a certain degree as a bit of headwind. Again, there is no magic bullet. There is no snap of the fingers and boom, problem solved. Yes, some people, it seems that way, but their circumstances are not the same necessarily as yours. Remember the NAGA syndrome? Not as good as. Don't compare yourself to somebody else. Never compare your reality to somebody else's highlight reel. You only compare you to you. Look at your forward progress and measure what is actually going on to know if you are or aren't going in the right direction. This then is how you're not just making smart health choices, but really wise health choices that are going to be able to transform the entire nature of your life, improving the quality, not just where you are today, but for many years and many decades to come. As we've said, no matter what you do, you've got to give it a fair go for 6 to 12 weeks. That is standard physiological length of time that it takes to produce change. If you're not willing to give at least 6 to 12 weeks on any given go, then you have to be real with yourself. You will not get where you want to go. Remember, people say they want to do whatever it's going to take to be well. Do you know what it's going to take to be well? Especially if, again, this is your first time hearing this message. If what I'm telling you is that you have already dropped 50 to 70% of your function and you want to get back to 100%, you need to be real about what the nature of the true underlying issue is. Otherwise, if you just want to be in the pain loop, that's okay. That's fine. But if you want to be healthy, you want to be well, it's important to understand what's the process that actually got you where you currently are, and what is it actually going to take to get you where you want to go. Simple, again, not always easy. I don't mean this one here necessarily as a downer, but it's always important. We can have the vision, but we also have to be real about where we are right now. Be honest with yourself. Where are you right now? Because only when you're honest with where you are will that give you the opportunity to cleanse that part of you so that you can say, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. This is what I need to do in order to get it. Because then if you make that change within you, it may take you a while, but you will get there. Good luck with that. We'll see you in the next video.